Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Chapter 21, Conditions for Task Triggers. Mr. Logan, I haven't seen you for about a month. Do you feel like your memory has recovered? Hearing this, Logan showed a wry smile on his face, shook his head and said, Unfortunately, Dr. Carl, I have received treatment from you several times, but there is no sign of my memory recovering. I'm planning to receive the last treatment. If it doesn't work, I won't hold on to that hope. There's no need to be so pessimistic. Carl pondered slightly, then bent down and opened the cabinet in front of the desk. Mr. Logan, I can recommend you a place to go. Carl rummaged through the cabinets in his consulting room. Seeing that the business card in the cabinet in his memory was still there, Carl immediately reached out and took out the business card. Mr. Logan can take this business card and go to my old friend according to the address on the business card. He must be able to provide you with help that I cannot. Logan was taken aback. Seeing the business card that Carl pushed in front of him, Logan reached out to pick it up and glanced carefully. Charles Francis Xavier? Yes, he is an old friend I used to know when I was studying at Columbia University. Charles has made a lot of achievements in psychology. Mr. Logan, you should know that you are different from normal people, and so is Charles. He should be able to help you. Carl's words made Logan feel confident. In that case, I'll leave immediately to find him at the address on the business card. Carl nodded and stood up from the chair, facing the familiar Wolverine. He couldn't help but patted him on the shoulder. Old friend, I hope you can get your wish. Dr. Carl, if my memory recovers successfully, I will definitely come to treat you to dinner. Logan smiled slightly. After being sent off by Carl, the two came to the reception desk on the first floor together. At the previous reception, Carl discovered that Logan was not alone this time. Glancing at the girl who was about 17 or 18 years old standing beside Logan, Carl asked with interest, Mr. Logan, is this Dr. Carl? You're thinking too much. Logan's eyes twitched. I always feel that my image in Dr. Carl's heart is a little bit not good. Her name is Anna Marie. When I came back from abroad, I happened to meet a girl on the way. Anna Marie? Carl looked carefully at the girl, standing next to Logan, feeling very surprised. This girl named Mary should be the little naughty mutant. If Carl remembers correctly, the ability possessed by this little rascal is very special. She can quickly absorb and seize other people's wisdom, super ability, personality and even life by touching other people's skin. Magneto in the movie valued the special ability of the little rascal, and wanted to capture her to absorb his own ability to complete the plan. But Carl remembers very clearly that, in the original movie plot, after Logan and the little rascal were attacked by Sabretooth on the way, they should have been rescued by Charles and his X-Men. Why is the plot of this world different? Could it be that the original story has changed due to the integration of multiple movie universes? This situation inevitably made Carl think of the premature destruction of Krypton that the system said. Our journey was not easy. Fortunately, we were lucky enough. Logan recalled what happened on the road after he met this little girl, and his expression became serious. If it wasn't for his unimaginable self-healing factor, he would have died long ago under that kind of bomb attack. The little rascal was also lucky to survive, and the two of them were able to come to NY City as a blessing in misfortune. It seems that you have experienced unusual dangers on the road. Carl noticed the change in Logan's expression, and comforted him. It's fine if nothing happens. Logan should go find the person I introduced to you as soon as possible. Okay. I'll treat you to a drink another day. Logan smiled and walked out of the clinic with the little rascal. Not long after Logan and the little rascal left, Carl's gaze that had been outside the clinic door suddenly froze. What? Carl frowned, because he saw an incredible scene. On a crowded street, a man with a middle-parted hair suddenly turned into a noble lady with excellent appearance and temperament. Carl lowered his head imperceptibly, his face full of pondering. The person with the transformation ability just now, could it be Mystique? I don't know if the Mystique of this world has become a Magneto or is still with Charles. If it's someone from Magneto. Carl frowned slightly. Magneto sent Mystique here, apparently aware of Logan's and Rascal's movements. It's just that Mystique didn't choose to do it. Could it be that he planned to wait for Logan and the little rascal to go to a place where there are few people and prepare to do it? But this is already the city of NY, and the mutant academy established by Charles is already very close. If Magneto and the others do something, Charles will definitely notice it, or he has already noticed it. With Charles's way of doing things, presumably Storm and Cyclops should be arranged to rush over to support, right? Definitely, this is just Carl's own conjecture. Originally, he planned to go back to the consultation room to pack up and go to Gotham City with Harley. Until the system task is suddenly triggered. Ding. Trigger the mission. Visit Mutant Academy with Wolverine and Rascal. Rewards for task completion. Steel Body Superman Template Integration Progress increased by 0.2%. Silver Superman Template Integration Progress increased by 0.2%. Looking at the task that was suddenly triggered, Carl thought to himself that it really is. My guess is indeed correct. If you take the initiative to contact Superhero, there is a high probability that you will be able to trigger the mission. I just don't know whether the task triggered this time is from Logan or the little rascal. In short, it is good to be able to trigger the task. Chapter 22. Carl turned and went straight up the stairs, eventually reaching the door of Harley's office. Carl originally planned to go to Gotham City with Harley after completing the daily tasks. But now that a new task is triggered, Carl naturally wants to focus on the task of increasing the degree of integration of the Superman template. What else is more important than increasing the Superman template integrate and improving the purity of your Superman bloodline? Naturally, these jobs have to be sidelined first. Ever since, Carl found Harley and asked for a leave of absence with an excuse. Hearing that Carl had something to do, Harley had no choice but to agree. In the end, Harley could only take his female assistant to Gotham City together. After leaving the clinic, Carl walked briskly down the crowded street. After feeling that it was almost time, Carl picked a nearby alleyway without surveillance cameras, and walked in. Take off the Superman glasses worn on the face and put them into the storage space of the system. Carl raised his hands and moved them to the front of his chest. With a slight effort, the white shirt he was wearing was pulled away. The black close-fitting battlesuit was revealed on Carl's body. Then there was a loud bang, and Carl's figure suddenly soared into the sky. With a piercing sonic boom, Carl flew straight towards where Logan and Rascal were. In the current era, Mutant is divided into two camps, the Mutant Brotherhood headed by Magneto, and the Mutant Academy headed by Charles. Magneto and Charles are leaders in their own factions. Unlike Magneto's tragic experience, Charles is undoubtedly much happier. Although his legs cannot walk, his family's conditions are unmatched by Magneto. Charles was born in a wealthy family since he was a child, so he enjoyed an extremely good education, and the amount of assets under his name is also quite large. Therefore, the mutant college established by Charles in NY was also transformed from his manor. Transforming the manor into mutant college, actually one of Charles' assets, had no bearing on him. Charles Manor is located on the outskirts of the city, in a relatively remote location, and can only be reached through a park. Logan and Rascal were on the path through the park at the moment. But approaching the direction of Mutant Academy, Logan felt something was wrong. The rich combat experience and keen sense of smell that have been on the battlefield several times are sounding the alarm in Logan's heart. Quiet. It's too quiet around here. Quiet enough to make people feel weird. Just when Logan was about to drag the little rascal out of this area, a figure suddenly jumped out from the nearby jungle. Before Logan could react, he only felt a blur before his eyes, and the figure had already thrown him to the ground in the distance. This scene caused the little naughty fellow to cover his mouth in horror. Looking at the blonde man who threw Logan to the ground in the distance, little rascal realized that he and Logan were being targeted again. It's that guy again. Noticing the man who was wrestling with Logan, Naughty's expression changed slightly. This time the little Naughty saw very clearly that that guy was the murderer who attacked her and Logan in the snowfield of JND country before. Logan. She seemed to feel that Logan was below, and the little rascal was anxious. She knew exactly what would happen if Logan lost the battle. So Rascal was constantly looking around, and was about to do something, when suddenly there was a deafening sonic boom in the sky. The body of Carl's supersonic flight exploded into the air, setting off an astonishing wave of air high in the sky. Flying at a supersonic speed of more than 20 Mach, he quickly used supervision to lock on the positions of Logan and the little rascal in high altitude. Before little rascal could react, Carl had manipulated the biological position and wrapped it around his body. Then it landed on the stone path in front of the little Naughty in an instant. The strong wind brought by the landing spread out around Carl. Carl clenched his fist lightly, and his control over the biological position seemed to be getting more and more perfect. Creature stance allows Carl to warp reality physics rules. Carl can even use his biotic stance to minimize damage in combat if he wants to. Had it not been for the presence of Little Rascal and Logan, Carl would have landed at a supersonic speed of more than Mach 20, with tons of force, and the sheer destructive force would have knocked the entire park down. Looks like I'm here just in time. Carl slowly released his slightly clenched hands. The gradually retracted creature stance caused the black cloak behind him to automatically clear up. Looking up into the distance, Carl has a confident smile on his face, and scarlet blood vessels are constantly condensing around his eyes. The temperature at Carl's location is rising. The little rascal who was close to Carl suddenly yelled, "It's so hot." Subconsciously took a few steps back. The little naughty looked at Carl in horror. What happened? Why did the surrounding temperature suddenly rise so much? However, the only response to Little Rascal was the harsh, high decibel hum that slowly sounded in the space. Boom! A bunch of scarlet, high-temperature heat eyes burst out from Carl's pupils. Sabretooth, who was wrestling with Wolverine, didn't have time to pay attention to what was going on behind him. Combined with the extremely fast rate of fire of the heat sight, Sabretooth can't react at all. The scarlet fever vision was surrounded by a terrifying shockwave, and Sabretooth's back was pierced by the heat vision in an instant. Even though Sabretooth has the same fast self-healing factor as Wolverine, under the burning of the super heat vision released by Carl, the self-healing speed of the self-healing factor obviously cannot keep up with the speed of the heat vision, tearing the body. Ah-hh. A heart-piercing wail came from Sabretooth's mouth, only to hear a loud bang, and the impact force attached to the thermal sight forcefully blasted him, flying hundreds of meters away. Chapter 23. Sabretooth's body was like a kite with a broken string, smashed from a high altitude into the low slope in the distance, buried by the waste soil, life and death unknown. Logan stared at Sabretooth's blown figure in a daze, and he came back to his senses after a while. Logan never expected that there would be a helper in the process of scuffling with the enemy. Turning to look at Carl in the black battlesuit, Logan couldn't help but ask, "Who are you?" Carl didn't respond to Logan right away, following a figure in the jungle out of the corner of his eye. Mutant leprosy toad, as it is called, ability and leprosy toad are generally the same. Toad can stretch his tongue very long, the saliva attached to his tongue is highly corrosive, and his jumping ability is also amazing. Although he still looks like a human being on the outside, in fact, Toad's habits are faintly inclined to Toad, an amphibian. After all, no one who maintains human habits will use his tongue to roll a bird flying in the sky, and then eat it raw. Just thinking about that scene, Carl felt a chill towards the mutant Toad. Originally, Toad was sent by Magneto to help Sabretooth take away the little rascal, but the sudden appearance of Carl immediately made Toad's forehead beat a fine sweat. Toad, a toad who was active in the jungle, saw with his own eyes that the heat vision released by Carl easily pierced Sabretooth's body. You must know that Sabretooth has a terrifying self-healing factor. Even so, Carl still blasted a huge amount of meat hole in Sabretooth. After Toad saw Carl's terror, he no longer wanted to support Sabretooth, even he kept keeping distance from Carl. But even so, Toad could clearly see that Carl's eyes were focused on him. This terrifying visual ability and perception ability made Toad die. He trembled all over, as if he had a perception that the threat of death was approaching. Toad seemed to have stimulated the potential in his body, and suddenly showed an extremely exaggerated escape speed. With a light jump, Toad was tens of meters away from Carl's position. Wrapped around a tree with its tongue sticking out, Toad is running far with his unique way of moving. He just wants to escape from this place right now. At this moment Toad wished he could have dozens of legs, so that he could jump faster. Seeing Toad's figure fleeing in a hurry, Carl couldn't afford to chase after this guy. This kind of mutant is kind of disgusting, let's be honest. Carl felt like he would dirty his hands even if he killed him casually. After eliminating all the two surrounding enemies, Carl stepped a little, and the roar of crashing into the air resounded. Logan only felt a blur in front of his eyes, and then the man in the black battlesuit had already come in front of him. Logan was taken aback by the speed Carl showed. He was a bit confused whether Carl was using teleportation or the speed was too exaggerated for his dynamic vision to catch. The mission triggered by Carl is to visit the Mutant Academy with Logan and the Little Rascals. Therefore, Carl didn't care about the reaction of Logan and the Little Rascal, and grabbed their arms and looked up into the sky. At the same time, the biological position in Carl's body began to expand rapidly to wrap around Logan's and Rascal's bodies. Looking at Carl, who was in a squatting posture, Logan was about to ask something, but when the ground under his feet began to shake, Logan's expression changed involuntarily. As if a magnitude 9 earthquake was coming, Logan's pupils shrank to the size of a needle's eye. Because Logan saw that the nearby ground was cracking, as if the roar of a steamroller passing by the ground was constantly ringing. Boom! The dirt floor under Carl's feet exploded, and a huge force gushed out from the muscles in his legs. Carl's body was like a cannonball that was launched into the air, and he came to the sky at a height of 1,000 meters in an instant. This exaggerated flight speed turned the surrounding air into reality, and the strong squeeze friction swept towards the three of Carl, but was quickly dissolved by Carl's biological standpoint. At this moment, Logan and the little rascal were already stunned. They were shocked by what they saw. Looking down at the endless sea of white clouds below him, Logan swallowed hard. Logan had never seen such a haunting sight in his life. At a height of 1,000 meters, Carl turned around as if walking on the ground. After locking the position of the Mutant Academy, Carl's body exploded straight ahead. Under the astonishing acceleration, Carl's body blasted the air again, and a cone-shaped white sonic boom cloud quickly appeared in front of Carl. Even the speed of a fighter jet is far inferior to Carl's flight speed at this moment. Listening to the continuous sound of the sonic boom, Little Rascal and Logan looked at each other, and both could see the shock in each other's eyes. Especially Little Rascal, she couldn't figure out why she and Logan weren't affected by the slightest friction and impact under such terrifying acceleration and flight speed. Chapter 24. Mutant Brotherhood Headquarters. Magneto's face is extremely gloomy at the moment. After being debriefed by Toad, Magneto has learned the cause and effect of the whole thing. I didn't expect that mutant in the black battlesuit appeared again. Is he from Charles? It shouldn't be possible. His behavior does not belong to Mutant Academy. If such a character appears in Mutant Academy, I should know about it too. Magneto, who was sitting on the chair, couldn't help rubbing the space between his brows. While Logan and Rascal were still in J&D, Magneto sent Sabretooth for the first raid. Immediately after the failure of the first attack, Magneto prepared for this second attack. This time it should have been successful, but Carl suddenly appeared, catching Magneto off guard and breaking his plan. Fortunately, Magneto is still ready. It seems that we can only let Raven take action. Magneto's eyes flickered, and his expression was cold. The successive defeats of his subordinates have already made Magneto plan to go out in person. As the day when his plan unfolded was getting closer and closer, Magneto couldn't just let such a good opportunity slip away from him. At the same time, SHIE.LD headquarters, in the Sky Battleship Command Room. Commander Hill of SHIE.LD is reporting that he just captured the high-speed movement target. The target has been determined to appear again, and his flight speed is a little slower than last time, but also has a supersonic speed of Mach 10. The location where the subject last disappeared was over Xavier's school. Nick Fury, who was dealing with tasks outside, frowned imperceptibly when he heard this. Well, you Charles, you still say you don't know this mutant, and you actually played a trick. Nick Fury felt that it was necessary for him to go to Xavier's school to chat with Charles after Maa, Fark said. It was mainly Carl's way of doing things that made Nick Fury, who wanted to reconcile the contradiction between mutant and ordinary people, feel the crisis. Nick Fury definitely knows that the world is not peaceful, so he is currently preparing to form a special organization. But this organization needs strong enough members to join, and the powerful mutant is one of Nick Fury's most important targets. The plan to establish that special organization can be implemented, and a suitable timing is needed. An opportune time to make all the top brass on the human side think that organization must be formed. Charles, who was lecturing to the students in the college, seemed to have sensed something. His tone of speech paused, and then he smiled slightly at the students under the podium. This is the end of this class. You should complete the assigned homework first. After Charles finished speaking, he pushed his wheelchair out of the classroom. Seeing Jean Grey, who was waiting for him in the aisle of the classroom, Charles nodded slightly to her. A guest is coming, Jean. I still want to trouble you this time. It's okay, Professor. I also want to see who the guest is. Hearing the sound of sonic booms outside, Jean Grey pushed Charles' wheelchair, and the two came together to the spacious courtyard of Xavier Academy for Gifted Youth. Kingailai and Charles raised their heads at the same time, looking at the three people falling slowly from midair. Both of them had expressions of surprise on their faces. It's him. Jean Grey recognized Carl in a black battle suit almost at a glance. In previous bank robberies, Carl had been published in various media reports, so it was difficult not to draw attention to him. Definitely, Carl's world male figure and handsome face are important factors that deepen King Grey's impression of him. What's more, this is the Mutant Academy. Charles and Jean Grey are both one of the top management of the Mutant Academy. The original intention of the establishment of Mutant Academy is to guide mutant to make reasonable use of their super abilities to contribute to society. It is Charles' lifelong wish to let mutants and humans live in peace. Mutants like Carl, who have sprung up all of a sudden, are naturally the targets that the senior management of the Mutant Academy needs to pay attention to. After Charles saw Carl on the news, he used a brainwave enhancement device on Carl in order to find Carl's trace. The brainwave enhancement device allows Charles to sense his own kind, that is, to sense mutant. But what Charles didn't expect was that even he couldn't catch Carl's figure. Carl is like Magneto, wearing the helmet that isolates him from telepathy. The world seems to exist without this person. Therefore, the Mutant Academy actually gave up the search for Carl. Unexpectedly, Carl would take the initiative to come to Mutant Academy, which really surprised Charles. After sizing up Carl, Charles shifted his gaze to Rascal and Logan. Hearing what little Rascal was discussing with Logan in a low voice, Charles' complexion changed slightly. Magneto wants to catch these two. Why? Charles looked at Wolverine and the little Rascal puzzledly. In Charles' eyes, there was nothing special about Logan and Rascal. After watching the two for a while, Charles and Jean Grey finally focused their attention on Carl. While Charles and Jean Grey were watching Carl, Carl was also looking at the two famous X-Men in front of him. Compared with the old Charles who appeared in the X-Men movie, the Charles in front of him. This old friend of mine is obviously much younger. The same goes for Jean Grey, who is pushing Charles' wheelchair. Kingai, the woman who hosts the Phoenix Force in the Marvel Universe, is not only beautiful, but currently looks like she is in her early 18 seconds. Chapter 25. Whether it's Charles or Jean Grey, the appearance and clothing of the two of them also made Carl more convinced of his previous guess about the world. Sure enough, there is a high probability that the world I travel through is the movie universe. After all, these people don't look much different from those on the screen. Although it is 80% possible that he is sure that he is in the universe of the movie Integrate, Carl is not 100% sure that this is the movie universe. If these people look like they are in the movie, but their strength is as perverted as in the comics, it will be a headache. There was a few seconds of silence as Carl walked over to Charles. Feeling Charles' gaze on him, Carl could clearly sense that this old friend didn't recognize him. The hypnotic ability brainwaves released by Superman Invisible combined with the effect of Superman glasses can even affect Charles, a powerful telepathy ability user. This is indeed beyond Carl's imagination. No wonder Superman stands in front of Batman in comics and movies, and Batman can't recognize each other. Fortunately, they are colleagues of the Justice League. Charles, I have known you for a long time. Carl held out his right hand with a smile on his face. Charles was extremely astonished. He didn't expect the other party to recognize him. When he came back to his senses, Charles immediately reached out and shook Carl's hand. I've seen news about your excellency on the news before, and I didn't expect that we would meet so soon. Carl was non-committal to Charles' compliment. Logan and Little Rascal also came over at this time, and Carl just said, I found these two were attacked by a mutant when I passed by the park over there. I see that their location is close to Xavier's school, so I speculate that these two should come to Xavier's school for help. Suddenly, Charles thought, no wonder these three people came here together. Slightly calming down, Charles looked up at Carl and asked, I don't know how to address you, Your Excellency? Carl. Carl? Charles froze. Because Carl's name is exactly the same as his strong psychiatrist friend from school. The figure of that old friend appeared in his mind, and Charles just realized that he hadn't contacted that old friend for a while. I see. Welcome to Mutant Academy, Sir Carl. My name is Charles Xavier, and this is my assistant, Jean Grey. Hello. Carl looked at Jean Grey and nodded. Welcome Mr. Carl to visit Mutant Academy. Kingai, who had been observing Carl, also greeted with a smile. Feeling the subtle fluctuations of mental power on King Grey, Carl couldn't help recalling the abilities of Charles and Jean Grey in his mind. Both Charles and Jean Grey possess telepathy mental abilities. Comparing the two, Charles obviously has a better grasp of his ability, because Carl didn't notice the slightest fluctuation of mental power in him. As for Kingailai's words, it seems that there is still a long way to go before becoming the destructive phoenix in the future. But psychic abilities seem to be a threat to Superman. Carl couldn't help but freeze when he thought of how oppressive people with mental abilities are to Superman. Jean Grey may be a lot less of a threat to Carl, after all, she's still growing up. But Charles is different. As the most powerful mind ability user in the X-Men world, Charles' mind control ability poses a huge threat to Superman. As we all know, Superman's magic defense is much lower than his physical defense. Definitely, this is not to say that Superman cannot resist magic. On the contrary, for ordinary magic, Superman can completely resist it with his body without dodging or avoiding it. But if it was the magic released by a top magician, it would be an unwise choice for Superman to resist with his body. Just because it's unwise to fight hard doesn't mean Superman can't dodge. Superman has amazing movement, speed and strength. He can even knock down the magician before he can release his magic. Therefore, in Carl's eyes, magic is not a concern at all. For Carl, who has the silver Superman blood, the real weakness of Superman should be his inability to resist the mind control ability. When encountering a spiritual super ability person, Superman has almost no ability to resist. This is why Superman in the Justice League will be controlled by Darkseid, the Dark Lord of Apocalypse. Silver Superman bloodline allows me to have all kinds of abilities at will in the future. But I'm still too far away from that peak period. Carl murmured in his heart. Carl does now have the potential to roll over if the mind control class ability is the enemy. It seems that I have to find a way to make up for my lack of mental resistance. Carl looked at Charles, but he wasn't too worried. Carl still has great confidence in Charles' character. Especially the Charles in front of him is not the high-spirited age when he was 18 or 19. He has obviously experienced some things now, and he will no longer use telepathy ability to invade other people's minds casually. But even so, Charles' powerful mental power made him realize how amazing the aura emanating from Carl was. Combining Carl's expressiveness data sent by SHIE.LD earlier, Charles' expression froze slightly. Carl's flight speed exceeds several times the speed of sound, and his powerful body is indestructible, with unknown hardness. At the same time, Carl seems to have amazing power, and his eyes can release the same heat vision ability as his student Cyclops. These comprehensive abilities can't help but make Charles feel incredible. Because mutant basically only has one or two abilities, the number of super abilities that can appear on Carl has far exceeded the upper limit of the number of abilities currently known to mutants. Thinking of this, Charles quietly unfolded his mental power. Charles didn't want to use mental power to enter Carl's mind and read his memories, but wanted to sense the brain waves released by Carl. The brain waves released by a mutant are completely different from those released by ordinary people. Using this feature, Charles can use the brain wave enhancement device to determine the coordinates of those mutant locations around the world. Charles' expression changed suddenly when he sensed that the brain waves released by Carl were completely different from those of mutant. Before he could react, that majestic and vast brain wave pressed towards Charles' location. Charles was taken aback, and quickly restrained all his mental power. Looking at Carl, Charles' heart was beating wildly. Wrong. They are all wrong. Even my initial guess was wrong. The man in the black battlesuit standing in front of him is not a mutant at all. Please like and subscribe.